From A.J. Brown's future to their quartet of free agents, plenty of questions still to be answered for the Eagles, and on Monday, the legal tampering period begins. We'll speculate on potential landing spots for their big pieces and much more over the next 30 minutes. Welcome into this Eagle Eye edition of Birds Huddle, presented by Toyota, official automotive partner of the NFL. Along with my podcast partner, Ruben Frank, I'm Dave Zangaro. Rube, what kind of week are you expecting from Howie Roseman come Monday?
Quiet week. I don't think there's going to be a lot of splash moves. I don't think that's how he's approached this year. You'd love to see him keep one of the guys that they would like to keep, but I just don't think there's going to be a lot going on in Eagles world over that first week of free agency.
We know Howie likes to make splashes, but you're probably right. If there's a splash, it might just be, hey, let's keep one of our big name free agents.
Might be keeping Brett Toth, might be the big splash move. But as far as going out and signing a big money, big ticket free agent, name guy, I just don't see it happening.
That brings us to our three-point stance presented by Toyota. Stance number one, the Eagles need a resolution on A.J. Brown soon. There have been plenty of reports about his future, and Howie Roseman hasn't exactly extinguished those flames. But, Rube, it will be pretty hard to navigate this offseason if they don't know what they're doing with Brown first and foremost.
Yeah, no question about it. You got to plan for the 2026 roster, and if you don't know whether A.J. Brown's going to be a part of it, how do you sign free agents? How do you go into the draft? So it's something that needs to be resolved fairly soon because if they do end up trading him, they got to figure out how to replace him.
It's tricky because from a salary cap perspective, a trade makes more sense in the summer, but you're right. Like, how do you plan on the 2026 season without knowing if this guy's going to be here or not? And I think right now you look at the need at receiver. We know Jahan Dotson's a free agent. He's probably leaving. So it's a nice, comfortable medium need at receiver. It becomes a pretty darn high need if they don't have A.J. Brown.
Yeah, and they probably need more at that position than they have even if A.J. comes back. So there's a lot to it, but certainly they're a better team if he's here and if he wants to be here and if he's happy. But if he's not, then they're a better team without him.
Yeah, it will be a blockbuster trade. Let's take a look at some recent trades for established wide receivers. Devontae Adams fetched a first and second round pick from the Raiders in 2022. More recently, Stephon Diggs and a couple of day 3 picks got the Bills a second rounder. And then last year, the Steelers got DK Metcalf and a late round pick swap for a second rounder. So, Rube, what kind of return do you think is realistic for A.J. Brown?
Well, I certainly wouldn't do it if I'm not getting a 1 back and maybe a 1 and something else. And I don't think Howie's going to give him away. Certainly a 2 and, maybe a 2 and a 3 or something, or if maybe there's a player involved. But I'd want a first-round pick back and maybe something else.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I don't think it's crazy to ask for a first-round pick. Now, if we start saying like they want a first and a second, all right, that's a little much. But a first-round pick, especially late in that round where, the Bills are picking, where the Patriots are picking, those types of teams that could probably convince themselves that they're one player away from this. Yeah, I think there's a chance that maybe Howie gets those teams kind of bidding against each other. And then in that case, I think that's fair compensation.
Yeah, I think he's still a top 10 receiver in this league, despite last year, despite the 49ers game, which was a disaster. You get a pick. If you get a premium pick, a day 1 pick, you take that and draft yourself a nice wide receiver to develop to replace him.
Yeah, it is a scary thought, though, because the last time a team did that, they traded A.J. Brown. They used that first-round pick. Traylon Burks didn't exactly work out for the Titans, but yeah, maybe you're
and their GM got fired.
Yeah, so maybe the history doesn't bode well there. I don't think the Eagles want to trade A.J. Brown, but if they're in a situation where they feel like they have to, I think that at the very least the compensation has to be pretty high.
Yeah, and unless you have some assurances from him that if he is here, he's not going to be a problem, there's not going to be drama, and I don't know how you get him to promise that because it's in his nature. It's just who he is. He can't be a distraction, and he can't let his frustrations kind of go over onto the field, and that was the problem this past year. You can't have that.
That was the issue for me. It's like once it starts to show up on the field, then it is a real issue. All right, stance number 2, getting Kenyon Sadiq would be a pretty ideal outcome for the Eagles in the draft. The tight end out of Oregon lit up the combine this year. And Rube, you dropped the most recent mock draft. You had him going to the Eagles at 23. What do you like about him?
Well, I like that he's a playmaker. He can catch, he can run. He's a good enough blocker that you can use him. He's not going to be plowing over any defensive ends, but they need a weapon, whether AJ's here or not. The cupboard is bare at tight end. This is kind of a modern-day receiving tight end. That's what we're seeing in the league these days. That's who's getting drafted high. I really look. They don't have a tight end, and if they lose Goddard, this is a young version of a playmaking tight end, kind of a Keith Jackson type. And you saw what he did in '88. Well, you might not have seen what he did in '88, but All-Pro tight end.
I was grinding the tape from the crib, man.
I believe it. Yeah. Now his combine was so good, he might have played his way out of that 23 spot. How he might be able to go up and get him with a little trade, but certainly a guy that would make a huge difference here.
Yeah, I mean, his combine was unbelievable. The 40 time alone, going sub 4.4 at that size is pretty unbelievable. He's an exciting player. He would be a big boost for this offense. And, I know that people are out there going to say there's no chance he gets to 23. Let's look back at the recent draft history of the Philadelphia Eagles, right? People said there's no chance Jalen Carter falls in the range, or Nolan Smith, or the next year Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jod Campbell last year. Sometimes guys fall. Sometimes guys end up in your range that you don't expect. So never say never on this.
Yeah, you're going to hear like 45 different players. They're going to be a first-round pick. So guys, there's going to be really good players down in the mid-20s where they seem to always pick.
Yeah, but if he's there at 23...
I like the pick.
Yeah, run that in. Stance number 3. This is the year the Eagles need to find a Lane Johnson replacement. We've talked about having a succession plan for years, but it might be finally time to make sure they do, Rube.
Yeah, I think we're getting to that point. I think last year's draft, we all expected them to take an offensive tackle. I know how he did. But we're at the point now where you really have to start thinking about who's next at right tackle. And it's hard to imagine Lane not being here, but I think the retirement threat this offseason kind of really put into focus just how important it is to get a replacement. Now, I like the idea of drafting a guard, a guy who can come in and compete at right guard with Tyler Steen and then become your right tackle of the future. Certainly it's not going to help not having that guy around to develop whoever you do draft. But I just think it's time to, he's not going to play that much longer. If this is not his last year, it's going to be the year after. You got to start thinking about who's next at that spot.
Yeah, and the Eagles have had success drafting a guy with the starter already in place and letting the young player learn under him. And there are so many good options as you look at the best offensive tackles in this draft that you see there. Now, I know it's probably a little out of their range. He's probably going to go top 10, top 15. But, if a Spencer Fano or Monroe Freeling start to slide, you like them. How about Max Ihanachor from Arizona State? Had an excellent combine, ran super fast, and he's a bit of a raw prospect. But that's the beauty of drafting this guy now is that, he'll have a year to maybe sit and develop. You see Ihanachor here. I mean, just a massive human, did not play high school football, moves better than anyone at his size should, which is kind of a common theme when you look at some of these first-round tackles. And it seems like that's the sweet spot is in the first round for these tackles. It does feel like there's a drop-off after that. So as much as you might like a Kenyon Sadiq, there's a chance that if you're going to find the tackle of the future, it's probably going to need to happen in the first round. And we'll see. Obviously, the Eagles have hit some dart throws before. Jordan Mailata in the 7th was one of them. But it feels like if they're going to find the replacement this year, it might need to come in the first round.
Yeah, you're probably right. You just wish Stout would be here to develop whoever they do draft. Who's the last Pro Bowl offensive lineman they drafted that wasn't coached by Stout? I guess it was Trey Thomas, right?
Sure.
And that was 28 years ago.
Stout was here for 13 seasons.
Yeah, so it's they're going to miss him, and I think they're going to miss him in the evaluation process before the draft and certainly in the development process.
Yeah, I think they're going to miss him, but that can't be the reason not to draft one. You got to just hope that you have the pieces in place to develop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Time for Turn to the Experts, presented by Carrier. The Eagles have 4 key free agents set to hit the open market on Monday. So Ruben and I are going to go through and predict which team they end up on and just how much they might make in the process. So let's start with Nakobe Dean. You're going with Nakobe to the Raiders. I have him going to the Cowboys.
Nakobe just kind of seems like a Raider to me. I can just picture him in that uniform. They're losing their line. They're in danger of losing both their starting linebackers. I think he's going to get in the $10 million range, which is a lot for a guy who hasn't really played a ton of football, but he's been so good when he has played. I think teams are going to really be intrigued by. He's still a young guy. You get a free agent who's this young, who can play in this. He's been in a Super Bowl as a special teamer. Boy, I think they're going to really miss him. I'm going to miss him. Somebody's going to get a really nice young linebacker.
Yeah, I think he's going to get more than that. I think he's going to be in the 12 to 15 range. And I know fans are not going to like this. I have him going to Dallas.
Come on, Dave.
Yeah, look, I get that that's not going to be very popular, but the Christian Parker connection is real. CP takes over as the defensive coordinator in Dallas, has familiarity with him. I think him and Overshone in that defense, that's two really great playmakers behind Quinn Williams. Like all of a sudden that defense is a lot better with Christian Parker as the DC. So I do like Nakobe Dean going to the Cowboys.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen.
I think everyone in Philadelphia hopes that doesn't happen, but it might. How about next? Dallas Goedert. He had to take a pay cut last year to return to the Eagles on a revised one-year contract. This year, he'll be an unrestricted free agent. I have him going to Denver. Rube, you have him joining a division team just like Nakobe Dean. You have him going to the Commanders.
Yeah, I'm going to the Commanders, and once again replacing Zach Ertz, who I don't think will be back in Washington, coming off that injury. But he can still play. Could come here, but that's the story for another day. I think Goddard really improved his value. He had a very good season. He was terrific in the postseason. He always has been. He's one of the top 10 tight ends in NFL history in the playoffs. Boy, I think he's going to get, he's certainly going to get a lot more than that one-year $10 million deal. I think it'll be in the 13, 14, 15 range.
Wow. So you think multi-year deal for him too?
2-year deal, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I like him in Denver. It's a Sean Payton offense. I think they need a tight end. They were kind of in flux a little bit last year. They tried Evan Ingram and Adam Troutman, but getting Dallas Goedert in that offense I think would really help them. And I think it would be an offense that would feature him. He'd get paid. I think that'd be a nice spot for him.
Yeah, you like to see him. He's never made a Pro Bowl. He's got the most catches ever by a tight end to never make a Pro Bowl. You like to have him see that one big season.
Yeah, I think it's possible still.
Yeah.
How about Reed Blankenship? He's blossomed into a starter and a pretty good team captain after being an undrafted free agent out of Middle Tennessee State a few years ago. I've got him going to Arizona, Rube. You have him going to Baltimore.
Yeah, and he's a guy you hate to lose. You got him as an undrafted, I think $5,000 bonus guy a few years ago, developed him. He really grew into a very good starter, big part of that Super Bowl team, 2 Super Bowl teams. You hate to lose guys like that you've developed. Here's Josh Jobe. They can sure use him back too. But yeah, I got Reed going to Baltimore. They're losing a couple linebackers in free agency, and plug and play. Reed Blankenship will still be nearby. I got 2 of these guys going down to the down 95, so it'll be close by. But yeah, I think he'll do well down there.
What do you think value-wise for a Reed Blankenship?
I think that $10 million range is about right for him.
Yeah, I'm in like the 9 to 11 area, which is a lot for a guy who's been solid but has not been a star in the NFL. He really offered them some stability. I like him in Arizona. They're about to lose Jalen Thompson, their starting safety, who I think is going to get more than that on the market. So kind of a way for them to pivot, find a new safety. And Nick Rallis still down there, the defensive coordinator. Jonathan Gannon brought him to Arizona. The Cardinals kept him. So some familiarity.
Yeah, Nick Rallis, linebackers coach here, but certainly has a lot of familiarity with Reed.
He does. All right, we saved the best for last. The biggest free agent fish, edge rusher Jalen Phillips, expected to be one of the most highly coveted players on the market. But I'm saying he stays put here with the Eagles. Rube, you've got him going to the Bengals.
Yeah, I think out of all these guys, he's probably the most likely to be here in 2026. I just, some of these numbers I'm hearing scare me. Mid-20s he's a good player, but I don't think he's a $22, $24 million player. And I think that's what the market's going to say for him. There's not a lot of really quality edge rushers out there in free agency, especially a younger guy like him. He's had some injuries. The production hasn't been elite. He's never had more than 8.5 sacks, and that was his first year. So I just think he's a good player. I'd love to have him back, but my walkaway number is going to be a lot lower than what he's going to end up getting.
Where would you be? There has to be a line, I think, for a free agent like this. There has to be a number where Howie says, all right, we did what we could. We can't go past it. Where would your line be?
Probably 20.
I would go above that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd be in the $17 to $22 million range. I think that would get it done. I think, and look, we know
you get him for $17 million, you get him.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't see that happening.
Yeah, maybe that's fair. I look at him as like he's the type of player Howie Roseman wants to keep. He's 26. He won't turn 27 for another couple of months. He's a former first-round pick. I think there's a really good chance his best football is still ahead of him. We know he fits the defense. He's the guy I'd really be hesitant to let walk out the door.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's just that number. If that number's too high, it could affect your ability to keep other guys. So just want to be careful not overpaying him for a guy who's averaged 5 sacks in his career.
Yeah. So anyone staying?
Brett Toth.
Okay. Yeah, and look, a lot of this, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Like if they allocate $17, $18 million or think they're going to pay Jalen Phillips, he goes somewhere else, then you have to maneuver a little bit and come up with a plan B, and they have all that mapped out. But that's kind of the fun thing about free agency. You can have all these plans in place, and then it starts, and the markets go out of whack, and you have to kind of recalibrate.
And I think a big part of the evaluation with Jalen Phillips is how do you feel about Nolan Smith? Because feel good about where Jalix Hunt is. If Nolan Smith, I mean, they just drafted him a couple years ago in the first round. The production hasn't been there other than that one stretch at the end of the 24 season, but he looked great in that stretch. So it's not really a position, like they don't have another tight end. They don't really have a replacement for Reed Blankenship unless you really, they just don't have that. But they do have other edge rushers, so it becomes less of a priority.
Maybe, but you need more than two.
You do.
You do.
Keep throwing fastballs.